The year is 1898, and the heads of two publishing empires, Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst, are at war. The stakes are high, as Pulitzer's New York World and Hearst's New York Journal fight it out to see who sells the most newspapers. Each newspaper tries to top the other by printing news items big on scandal, violence, and sensationalism. And then an important news story breaks. In Cuba, rebels are fighting for their independence from Spain. Across America, there's great sympathy for the Cuban revolutionaries. It's the beginning of a conflict that will turn into the Spanish-American War and help launch the career of the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, a man named Theodore Roosevelt.
I remember William Randolph Hearst, Spanish-American War. His cable to Frederick Remington. You supply the pictures and I'll supply the war. By Jove, he did supply a war.
Like his rival tycoon Joseph Pulitzer, William Randolph Hearst hired some of the best talent of the day to help make his newspaper #1. He sent artist Frederick Remington to Cuba to cover the conflict. When Remington cabled his boss that he wanted to return because there was no war, Hearst cabled him back to stay where he was. He wrote, "You furnish the pictures, and I'll furnish the war." Hearst supported independence for Cuba. His newspaper liked to champion the underdog, but Hearst and Pulitzer also saw the Cuban conflict as a way to increase newspaper sales. Soon their dramatic stories about Spanish atrocities against the Cubans had America up in arms. These accounts told only the Cuban side of the story, and some of the news items were made up on the spot by reporters, but Pulitzer and Hearst printed them as the news. The American public sided with Cuba against Spain, but there was little thought of the U.S. entering the war until February 15, 1898, when the U.S. battleship the Maine blew up in the harbor of Havana, Cuba, killing 260 men aboard. The cause of the explosion was unclear, but the Pulitzer and Hearst newspapers soon blamed a Spanish torpedo and helped create a frenzy across America that put the country on the path to war. The battle cry became, "Remember the Maine." Americans were eager to join in the fight, and many volunteered to help the Cubans win their independence from Spain. Theodore Roosevelt was one of these volunteers. He helped put together a voluntary cavalry regiment. At first, the newspapers called his regiments Teddy's Terrors, but soon they became famous as the Rough Riders.
Who were we? Well, we were all Northerners and Southerners, Easterners and Westerners. We had college boys from the East and cowboys from the West. But no matter what their social position, no matter where they've come, they possessed in common the traits of hardihood and a thirst for adventure.
The newspapers covered every battle in the Spanish-American War, from the destruction of the entire Spanish fleet in the Philippines to the battles in Cuba. Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders made for great newspaper stories, especially the Battle of San Juan Hill.
We advanced alongside the 9th and 10th Cavalry. I jumped up on my mount, Little Texas, and with a wave of my hat, I yelled, "Charge!" We took Kettle Hill, and then up San Juan Hill. Ah, it was a glorious feeling when the heart of the wolf rises in your throat.
The Spanish-American War did not last long. By December of 1898, Spain signed a peace treaty that gave temporary control of Cuba to the U.S. Theodore Roosevelt became a household name and a hero. He went on to serve as governor of New York, vice president, and president when President McKinley was assassinated in 1901. Roosevelt won a second term in office in 1904 and was a popular and powerful president.
By and large, the press was very helpful to me, no matter what position I held in public life. For you cannot have a really true democracy without freedom of the press.
The freedom of the press included sensational reporting. By the end of the war, publisher William Randolph Hearst had what he wanted. His tactics succeeded in boosting the circulation of his newspaper, finally beating out Joseph Pulitzer. This type of sensational newspaper reporting, made popular by Pulitzer and Hearst, became known as yellow journalism, after this cartoon character known as the Yellow Kid. And yellow journalism today still means exaggerated and irresponsible reporting of the news.